Hey everyone, and welcome to MasterClass CX, a brand new episode where we're going to be talking about three key topics. The first one is really in terms of customer experience strategy and how do organizations essentially drive it with their outsourced partners. Clearly, a lot of organizations outsource, their front and their back office processes, and in that kind of a setup, how do the parent organization really drive that with the outsourced partners? The second element that we're going to be touching upon is in terms of the digital and human interaction. Is digital ever going to replace human interaction? And the third and the aspect that we'll cover off today is, have organizations such as Amazon, Uber, and Netflix set the bar too high generally for the industry? How do smaller players try and cover that gap off as well? Clearly, a lot of these organizations provide on-demand services, and I guess it's fair to say that not necessarily all organizations or businesses can kind of keep pace with them. We've got Ian Golding with us, who's going to be talking about those three very key topics. Ian, thank you so much for joining us on Masterclass CX. Great to have a customer experience expert with us this evening. Ian, just before we kind of dive in, do you want to very quickly introduce yourself? That's okay.
Yeah, of course. Well, it's always a pleasure. Those who've heard me speak before know that if anyone ever asks me to share my perspective on this subject, it's very difficult for me to say no. So I'm very happy to participate in this. Those who don't know me, I am a global customer experience specialist, been involved in this field for over 28 years now, 17 years on the inside of corporate organizations, 11 years working independently. As of next week, I will have worked in 59 countries around the world now, in almost every industry you can imagine. So I have a very unusual insight, I like to think, into the way customer experience and its practices are being deployed around the world. So I'm always happy to be grilled on the subject. So Nithin, whenever you're ready, grill away.
Great introduction. I mean, clearly, I think the key, questions that I had are really around. In fact, the first one's really around, outsourced relationships, right? Clearly, parent organizations have a certain vision that they have in terms of, customer experience, how we really need to kind of, own that entire customer journey. But then when you outsource that, let's say to a third party, how do you kind of drive that vision with the outsourced provider? I mean, in your experience, how do you think that needs to kind of be managed? And clearly, it cannot be something that is, for a certain amount of time. It's an ongoing journey. So what's your real take on that one, Ian?
Interesting question. And to be completely honest with you, no one has ever asked me that question. So I very often get asked things that I'm asked all the time, but I never get asked that. So it's a really interesting one and very pertinent to my experience, because not only have I worked within organizations that were working with outsourced partners, I also worked for an outsourcer for a period of time. And if I'm completely transparent with everyone, I didn't enjoy my time working for that outsourcer, and there are various reasons why. So I'm going to respond to the question based on my real experience of having been through this, combined with my perspective from being a CX specialist. Now, the one thing that we must never forget is that it is absolutely right for organizations to find the most efficient and effective way to deliver elements of their customer journey. And sometimes that will actually need the partnering, and I use the word partnering, with external parties to deliver it. Okay, so the need for specialist outsourced organizations is 100% appropriate. It always has been, always will be. I believe that organizations don't need to be experts in everything. So bringing in specialist partners to do certain things for you is, of course, the right thing to do. Consider what's the motivation for doing it. Is the motivation to save money, or is the motivation to deliver the best experience that you possibly can for your customers? It's wrong of me to say that all organizations look to an outsourcer because they think the outsourcer can deliver the best possible experience. Look, I know outsourcers will all say that that is absolutely what they are aiming to do, but we've got to be real. Most organizations are looking to an outsourcer to do what they were trying to do at a lower cost. Again, motivationally, I can't say that that's the wrong thing for an organization to do. We live in a very cost-constrained world, even more so right now than ever before. So trying to save money is obviously the right thing to do. I think historically have either misunderstood or ignored, and continue to do, is to recognize that when you outsource part of your customer journey, you are outsourcing part of your customer journey. And I say again, that very intentionally, you are outsourcing direct interaction with your customer to someone else. Now, if I give you an example of why I say that in that way, many online retailers outsource what retailers used to call the final few feet, the delivery itself, to someone else, okay, to a specialist partner, a logistics organization. You know, they can't afford to own their own logistics, so they outsource it to a logistics provider. But what they're doing, they're not just asking someone else to do the delivery, they are outsourcing arguably one of, if not the most important touch point in their customer journey to someone else. How many organizations think about it in that way? You know, I'm outsourcing that, the actual handing over of the thing that someone has bought to someone else. And if they don't think about that, what they are not recognizing is the significance of that particular touch point in the customer journey. I spent 7 years working for an online retailer in the UK. And in the UK, there was a particular logistics organization that was terrible at that delivery of that touch point. They would leave deliveries in dustbins. They would, you know, push things through letterboxes that wouldn't fit. There were stories of delivery drivers leaving iPhones under the wheels of cars, but without telling the customer that it was there, and they would drive over it. You know, and you know what this led to in the UK, just as an example, is that that logistics provider were originally the logistics provider for Amazon in the UK. But they were having such a damaging effect on the Amazon customer experience that Amazon had no choice but to take control of that touch point in the journey. Sourcing, they brought it back in-house because it was the only way they could control the customer journey. So critical is that I am not against outsourcing, but it is vital that we recognize that if we are going to incorporate a partner into the delivery of the customer journey, the partner has to understand that A, that is what they are, and that B, where it is that they fit into the customer journey and what they are expected to do in the delivery of the touch point, not just from a process perspective, but from a customer experience perspective. They need to understand what the customer experience strategy is and how customers need to feel when they are interacting with that touch point in the journey. That kind of dialogue, I believe, happens far more now than the example I'm sharing with you that was in the noughties. Okay, so we cannot just chuck it to an outsourcer, so to speak, and just expect them to get on with it. They are as integral a part of the delivery of the customer journey as anyone else. Hopefully, I know it's a long rant.
No, it definitely makes sense, Ian, and I think I'm glad you kind of mentioned Amazon as well, and how they've kind of responded to something like that. I'm sure there are other organizations in that. Yeah, so Amazon's a great example. Do you have any others that you've kind of come across?
I mean, ultimately, it's a payoff. And I suppose strategically, an organization that is utilizing an outsourcer, that they need to understand that if you're going for that, this is a very English expression, so excuse me, penny pinching, and you're trying to squeeze it. If you're
Yeah.
doing that without understanding the journey, then you've got to accept you will make the experience worse, and that will have consequences. Another great example, and I'll provide a personal example again to me. One of the largest low-cost airlines in the UK is an airline called EasyJet. Now, many people watching this will have heard of EasyJet. Now, a few years ago, I had a terrible experience with EasyJet. And the experience led to me writing about it, because I write a lot about this subject. And to cut a very long story short, the CEO of EasyJet at the time, a lady called Dame Carolyn McCall, contacted me. Now this is very unusual. I think actually she was quite courageous to actually have the desire to pick up the phone and phone me and say, tell me about it. And I won't go into the detail of the story, but ultimately the issue was with ground staff are not employed by the airline directly. They are outsourced to a handling agent, a partner. Emirates are no different. Emirates in Dubai, it's not an issue. They're in control of everything. But if you go to Johannesburg, okay, which I did have an unfortunate experience with Emirates in Johannesburg, the ground staff are not Emirates employees, that they are an outsourced agent. Okay. Now, the question is, how well does the airline understand their outsourced partners in their understanding of the experience they want to deliver to their passengers? Because what this CEO said to me at EasyJet is, I understand it was the handling agent, but there's nothing I can do about them, that they're not employed by me. Okay. Wearing EasyJet uniforms. I said, but my engagement is with EasyJet. It's not with an outsourced handling agent. My relationship is with you. And because they've delivered such a terrible experience, not only will I not use you again, thousands of people have now read the same thing and will be thinking the same thing. So I think what we need is for leaders to recognize, as I say, that outsourcers aren't just there to save you money. That they are there to deliver your customer experience. And if you want to maintain the quality of that experience and maintain the reputation of your brand, you need to spend as much time focusing on the standards you need them to deliver in terms of alignment with the experience as you focus on the numbers you want them to hit. I think at the moment with outsourcers, it's too much about the numbers. It's not enough about ensuring that they maintain the quality of the experience that ultimately is essential to preserve the reputation of the brand sustainably.
Well, no, absolutely. And yeah, I think it's some real, great takeaways from that. And I think, the more organizations recognize that, I think the better. And hopefully they do it sooner rather than later as well.
I always will say to people that whatever you think about the discipline of customer experience, the application and adoption of many of the tools and techniques, what I call the science of customer experience, is only effective when it's done collaboratively and cross-functionally. Okay. But for example, when you map a customer journey, it needs to be mapped by a representative cross-functional team. Now, a representative cross-functional team from across the end-to-end customer journey. Now, if your organization is utilizing outsourced partners who are delivering part of that journey, they need to be in the room when you're mapping it. And there are times when the outsourcer doesn't get involved. Oh, they're just an but they are as much a part of the journey as anyone else. And so we need to make them feel that way, and include their people as much as our own.
Yeah. So let's quickly kind of shift gears now. I mean, obviously, the whole aspect around digital and how tech can kind of play into the whole customer experience is getting, I guess, a lot more focus. I think the pandemic has kind of helped, and I think from all the reports that you see, people say, hey, what would have probably been done in 10 years was done in a couple of years, right? Having said that, I think there's the human element as well, which I think is key and important. Based on your interaction with various players within the industry, how do you kind of see that whole digital human interaction kind of working? Do you think digital will at any point of time, replace, the human element at all? Or is that something here to stay?
This is something I am asked on a regular basis. And I have a very definitive view on it. Digital evolution is here to stay. Whatever way we look at it, the adoption of digital technology has been radically increasing over the last 20 years and will only continue to gather pace as we get smarter and we learn more. Artificial intelligence and all of these things that are way beyond my understanding as to how they even work. But there is no doubt that will, continue. Digital technology is critical to ensuring that we can deliver quicker, better, faster, smarter experiences for customers. Digital technology should be making all experiences more accessible for our customers. Right. And where digital is being used for the right reason, that is absolutely the result. Again, I don't want to stress or keep dwelling on Amazon, but Amazon are the poster child of what that means, because they have been able to use digital technology to create the most accessible retail experience on earth. And they are continuing to work to make that experience easier and easier. However, a little bit like some of the conversation around outsourcing, that the challenge with digital isn't digital itself, but it's the way digital is adopted and the motivation for adopting it. Right. Many organizations around the world are actually seeing digital technology not primarily as a way of improving the customer experience, but primarily as a way of cutting cost, eliminating human interaction, and saving money. Yep. That's the motivation. Now, some again may argue it isn't, but it is. If we can, remove heads, if we can take bums off seats, which is a horrible expression, and replace it with digital, that will save us money. That is what we want to do. The problem is too many organizations are doing that. They are seeing digital as the replacement for human interaction. They are throwing digital technology at the customer journey. And because they don't understand the journey and the importance of human interaction, they ultimately end up making the customer journey worse. Right. So they save money, but the experience the customer has is worse. I was with a financial services organization in the Middle East a few years ago, and someone in the digital team said to me, Ian, we've got a problem. So what's the problem? And this person said, well, we've got a real problem on our website because we've introduced a new chatbot and customers hate it. Yeah, I said, okay, well, how did you put it in place? Well, when we turned the chatbot on, we removed the ability for our customers to phone us. Right. Yeah. Again, it sounds like such a stupid thing to say, but it hadn't even occurred to them that customers didn't hate the chatbot. They hated the fact that you were forcing them to use something that they didn't necessarily want to use. The reason they hated it is because they wanted to speak to someone. They didn't at that time want to use the chatbot. So it wasn't the technology itself, it was the way it had been executed, because their motivation was to remove heads from the contact center. They didn't want those people in the contact center. Now, ultimately, if I bring all of this together and to firmly answer your question, what we must never forget is that customer experience has always been and will always be about human to human interaction. Whether that human to human interaction is between a human and a computer and a machine, or a human and a human, even if it's with a machine, you still need humans to determine what that machine is going to tell the other human.
Right.
And so, if you see what I mean, and in 2023, the connection between the customer experience and the employee experience is more significant than it has ever been. Because if we're going to be able to design digital technology to leave customers feeling the way we want them to feel, we need our people to understand that. And we need them to be treated in the same way we want our customers to. If you tell your people, save money, that, well, they'll design the technology to save money. They won't be thinking like a customer. They won't be thinking the way the customer does. So I think fundamentally, if organizations want or see digital as a replacement for humans, will they achieve their objective of saving money? Yes.
Right.
Will they make customer experiences worse? Yes. And this is that, again, it's a choice. If you want to go digital only, good luck to you, but you need to understand the consequences that might have. Human beings, and I think the pandemic demonstrated this, human beings thrive on interaction with human beings. And humans need to have that ability to choose what is right for them. If you remove that choice and force them to do something they don't want to do, guess what? They'll find somewhere else that they can do what they want to do themselves. If I give you just a very practical example, McDonald's. Whether you like McDonald's or not, okay, it is not the point. But McDonald's are constantly redesigning their restaurant experience, okay, because the world changes, and so they're constantly evolving it. And the most significant reiteration of that experience in recent times is when they introduced their digital touchscreens. Now, most fast food outlets have the same thing now, but McDonald's were the first to do it. But what McDonald's realized is that digital touchscreen would only work if people could pay by credit card. But what they understood is that not every customer has a credit card. Not every person is going to want to pay with credit card. So they had a choice to make. Do we essentially alienate anyone who wants to pay with cash? Okay. As an option. So when they redesign the journey, and it's still the case to this day, every McDonald's restaurant still has a physical cash desk for those customers who want to pay with cash. Right. So I think it's a good example that, of course, you can adopt technology, but if altogether, just because it's going to cost you less, you've got to recognize that there may be consequences to that.
Right. Yeah, and I think whilst you mentioned this example of this financial services firm, kind of forcing the customers to go into the chatbot, I remember this one article I was reading a few months ago about an airline that completely got rid of its its call center. Yeah, in the US. I can't remember the airline, but I was like, hey, how could you ever do something like that? I mean, just
very short-sighted, and ultimately, the last 3 years are the best example of things will go wrong. Something will happen that you can't expect, and if you're not in a position to deal with that, that potentially could be the end of your organization. So, if another pandemic hits and you have to cancel all of your flights, how are you going to deal with that? And if you don't have the ability to deal with that, you will, you could cease to exist overnight. So we need to think very proactively about the way we constantly redesign both the customer journey and our operating model that is delivering it. About the Gulf region is that the Gulf region over the last 30, 40 years has been continuously investing in infrastructure, investing in technology, and that's not stopping. I'm living in a country at the moment that hasn't done that over the last 30 years, and now we're starting to see the consequences of failing to invest, failing to think forward, and I think organizations need to be proactive. We are far too reactive. We'll wait till it goes wrong and then we'll deal with it. I think we now live in a world that is moving too fast, and you won't be able to react quickly enough.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, especially in a place like Dubai, I mean, you see things changing so quickly, but the government's also kind of moving at pace. In fact, they're driving some of that change as well. So yeah, absolutely right. Ian, and just on the last aspect that I really want to kind of quickly touch upon, right? So you've mentioned Amazon, but there are other organizations as well. So Uber, for example, you have Netflix. All of them are obviously providing on-demand services, right? And this has, I know, happened over the last few years. But have they kind of, set unrealistic expectations with customers, or the industry at large, where some other players aren't able to kind of keep pace? The likes of Amazon obviously have the finances to kind of fund all of this, digital, technology and stuff like that. But there could be smaller players out there who are kind of struggling. How do they kind of bridge the gap? Or is it a case that, hey, you know what, you kind of, either get onto the bandwagon or you perish?
I think they've set an unrealistic benchmark. I think what they've demonstrated is that anything is possible.
Right.
Now, again, you've got to think back to the way Jeff Bezos founded Amazon. I don't think even he could have anticipated what would have happened.
Right.
But in a room above the garage of his family home, creating an online bookstore that is now this gigantic monolith. But what he did and what Uber did and what these organizations who it now feels as though they've been with us forever, but again, they've only been with us for 5 minutes, is they disrupted, and I think that the key with disruption is that you realize there is a different way of doing it. There is a different way of doing something. I think the problem with it, and to a degree, this is a bigger issue for more traditional legacy organizations than it is some of the smaller organizations who are thinking, how do I grow? Legacy organizations have got a massive problem. Such a long time ago, but how many of them have looked at the just the fundamental design of their organization and asked themselves, is it now fit for purpose? And if it isn't fit for purpose, how are we going to change that? Because that is a scary thing to do. Most of these organizations were built not to be customer centric. They were built to sell as many products and services as possible. Now to change that requires a complete rethink of that's hard. And this is why customer centric transformation is, as we're seeing, is such a difficult thing, because it takes years. It can't just happen but the risk for those legacy businesses is that a new player can come straight into your industry next week that doesn't have any legacy processes. It's got no reputational issues. It's got no people who don't really want to be there, but it's a job, and they haven't got any of that. And the advances so quickly. Technology is not hugely expensive. It doesn't have to be to achieve those things. And just to close the loop back to the first question you asked me, I was speaking earlier this morning to a very good friend of mine who is both the customer experience and customer service specialist. She has been for many years. And she that I am not going to call an outsourcer,
Right.
but essentially what she can fulfill is exactly the same thing as a traditional outsourcer. And what she's building is an on-demand customer service capability for SMEs who they don't have the ability to build a contact center. They haven't got the
Resource.
would love to have a live chat capability. They'd love to have some kind of artificial intelligence. She is building an on-demand service to fulfill that, which will go live next month. And I think so. It demonstrates, and no one else does that. There is nowhere in the world where you can get on-demand customer service capability like that, which is remarkable when you think about it. So it requires a little bit of entrepreneurial thinking, but set an unrealistic bar. I think what they've demonstrated is that if you've got the vision and you've got the will, you can replicate what they've done. It's probably a 1 in a million chance that you're going to achieve what they have. But there will be many entrepreneurs that are willing to take that chance.
Just one other thing, just before I let you go. NPS is such a huge topic. I mean, a lot of organizations are doing it. How do you kind of view it?
When it comes to customer experience measurement, and it would take us about 5 hours for me to share my perspective on that with you. It is a subject that is very close to my heart. Those that have heard me speak about it will know that I'm very bold in saying that most organizations are measuring the customer experience badly. Used metric in the world today.
Right.
Are using it in a way that is leading them to draw completely the wrong conclusion. We live in a world where, again, unfortunately, we've become very obsessed with scores and numbers. And NPS is a classic example of an obsession with a number rather than the reason why we're gathering the number in the first place. And there is no better validation of what I'm saying than the creator of Net Promoter Score itself, Fred Reichheld, not even calling it Net Promoter Score anymore, because it's a system. It's a system that allows you to understand where it is you need to focus. So I'm not against Net Promoter Score, but it's really important that organizations understand that the score is not the point. The point, where is it in your customer journey that you're having a negative impact on customer perception? I would rather organizations obsess with the proportion of detractors and report that than report the score itself, because I think that would make it a lot more real for people. How do we reduce the number of detractors? If you think about that, that will give you motivation. If your organization is sitting there at the moment, patting itself on its back saying, we've got an NPS of 68, well, good luck to you, but I can tell you now that score is wrong.
No, absolutely. I think I was speaking to Nate Brown as well a few months ago. And he was kind of saying something very similar as well, saying that, hey, let's not get obsessed on the score itself. But I think it's important to really focus on what is that kind of feedback that's really coming in from customers, right? As long as you kind of focus on that and try and make those, small little improvements as you kind of go along, I think that's what great organizations essentially do. Good, great. I think that's a wrap on this episode, Ian. Again, thank you so much for taking the time and being here on MasterClass CX. It was great to have you on, and I'm hoping the next time you're here in Dubai, we do go and grab a coffee together. Yeah. And just before you go, where can we find you? Where can our listeners find you as well?
So unfortunately, my face is constantly on LinkedIn. And if anyone does want to ask me anything, they are always welcome to message me.
Sure.
Perfect. You're the man on LinkedIn. Good. Great, Ian. Thank you so much again for joining us, and we'll be in touch very, very soon.